gentlemen, and welcome to the Ride Warrior Choice Awards, the 2018 edition award show. I am Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York, alongside Andrea Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois. Andy, the Thrilling 32 bracket challenge is going on right now. We are accepting brackets. We're kind of at the halfway point here. The deadline to submit brackets will be this coming Friday, February 1st. Round one of the results will start going live Saturday, February 2nd, a week from today. So today we're going to kind of pass the time and we're going to go through the general awards. You guys voted in the Ride Warrior Choice Awards this year, submitted your wood rankings and your steel rankings, which is how we got to the Thrilling 32. And you also voted on several other categories just by putting a little X in the box. We got 12 categories. So tonight we're going to go through those awards here, Andy.
And unlike other awards that give out the same tired awards year after year after year,
right?
We like to freshen it up a little bit. Obviously, there's some awards that we keep year after year because they're new and exciting, and they change each year. Things like the most anticipated new ride, where that's going to be a different answer every single year.
Right.
But for the rest of the awards, we like to change them up and get new looks on things and ask you guys different questions. As opposed to just giving you the same tired old questions year after year, like best seaside park. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we actually take a lot of feedback from the voters here, and they say, oh, this would be a fun category to vote on. So a couple of these were suggested to us by the voters. When we did the awards last year, they said, put this one in next year. So typically we have anywhere from like 10 to 15 categories. We've had 15 the last couple years. We sized it down to 12 this year. So I think next year maybe we'll go back to the hopper from 4 or 5 years ago when we first started doing the Thrilling 32 and the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. We merged the Golden Loops and the Thrilling 32 into one. And that became the Ride Warrior Choice Awards a couple years ago. So I think maybe next year we'll go back to the hopper from the Golden Loop days, and maybe we'll bring back some of those that we haven't done in 3 or 4 years. We did Dark Ride, we did Drop Tower for a few years. Last year we did some new ones like favorite signature food item, favorite airtime moment. We came up with some different ones last year, and we got some new ones this year. So maybe next year we'll go back to a couple of those from a few years back. So would you like to see the winner of our first category?
Absolutely.
All right. So what we're going to do here, first we're going to give you the category, then we're going to read off the top 3 vote getters. We put several options for each of these. There were a couple of write-ins where you could just write in anything you want, and you were given an option to write in anything you want, but we gave you some of maybe the most popular choices to maybe choose from, just to make the tallying a little easier. So the first category is your favorite new ride of 2018. So this is your favorite ride that opened in 2018. Not much of a surprise on this one. There's no anticipation for this. 80% of the voters, Andy, voted for Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point. Obviously, that was the winner. It was really a race for second place here, and it was a close race for second place. 6% of the voters saying Twisted Timbers at King's Dominion, and 4% of the voters saying Time Traveler at Silver Dollar City. So that's kind of interesting. I think the Time Traveler and Twisted Timbers was kind of the debate there as to which one was going to come in second.
It would have been more interesting if we would have posed the question as, okay, we know Steel Vengeance wins. What was your second favorite new ride?
We should have. That's a very good point. And Steel Vengeance still might have come away with that one. No, very clearly not. So, but yeah, that actually would have been maybe a much better way of doing this. We should have had some foresight there. That's good point. Good point out of you. All right, so the next category was your favorite roller coaster queue. Now, this is just any roller coaster queue. And in third place with 14% of the vote was Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. One of my favorites, obviously, with the aquarium there and the music. Coming in second was the original Dueling Dragons queue at Islands of Adventure. And in first place was Escape from Gringotts, Universal Studios Florida, with 21% of the vote. Those are 3 good queues. I think Gringotts is kind of the go-to when you're talking, at least here in the States, that's definitely the go-to roller coaster queue. And we said roller coaster queue because there's a lot of flat rides and dark rides and whatnot at Disney and Universal parks in particular that have great queues. So we wanted to go with roller coaster queue. I know Cobra's Curse was close to making this list as well.
Well, I think in the next go around, I think it would be a lot more interesting to add in any queue because obviously you disqualify things like Spider-Man and Transformers and
Right.
Flight of Passage. That there's a whole lot of awesome lines out there. And these are still, I still think these would probably hold their own, especially the original Dueling Dragons queue. Escape from Gringotts, if you call it's barely a roller coaster. But yeah,
or maybe we go with favorite non-roller coaster queue now that we've done the roller coaster queue. Maybe we just do
absolutely. I think even these would, like I said, I think they would fare well in that discussion. But it'd be interesting to see if you open it all up where this goes. But definitely Escape from Gringotts, a fantastic queue line, especially the beginning part of it when you're walking through the bank and stuff. So and then if you take in the outer the outside of it as well, with the huge dragon up top, I don't know.
The little pre-show in the elevator I think is a really nice touch. I mean, it's sort of a pseudo ride within a ride on the Gringotts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cobra's Curse, Space Mountain, and Rock and Roller Coaster were some other popular vote getters here in this category as well, which are, again, heavily Disney Universal here with this category, obviously. I mean, you don't see a whole lot of great queues at your Six Flags and Cedar Fair parks generally speaking.
Although your Justice League queue a lot of them are pretty nice for a Six Flags park.
Yep.
There's a few good queues out there outside of
and the Justice League rides do tell a really nice story and kind of set you up for the ride. So they do that. So I will give you that for sure. All right. So moving to the next one, we have your favorite 2019 teaser campaign. So we're talking about a teaser campaign that was done during the 2018 season for a 2019 ride. And this one was a close race. The winner was Copperhead Strike at Carowinds with 47% of the vote, closely followed by Steel Curtain at Kennywood with 31% of the vote, and then Max Force, Six Flags Great America, coming in third with 7% of the vote. And Andy, this is one that maybe I disagree with the voters, because even though Copperhead Strike went on longer, I mean, it basically spanned the entire 2018 season, right? Up until, from April to the announcement. We talked a lot about this on some of our updates where they didn't really give you a lot of information for a long time. And then towards the end, they sort of did the same thing that Kennywood was doing all along. Kennywood's was much more interactive. Kennywood's was actually a contest. I personally voted for Kennywood on this one.
And I voted for neither on this one. I voted for Max Force because I thought from purely a teaser campaign perspective, we didn't know what we were getting. We had no idea what we were getting at Six Flags Great America. If you recall that campaign, we started off thinking we were getting some kind of water slide, and we end up getting a roller coaster. And we kind of went through the different teasers, and the teasers led us to figuring out what it eventually was. We weren't sure at the end, but it took us on that ride. It took us on that roller coaster, Danny. Copperhead Strike was fun. I liked the posters, but when we started getting into the numbers and the baking recipe, I don't. And maybe the leak had to do with that pretty much everyone knew what Copperhead Strike was before the teaser campaign even started, so that kind of soured everything. I think Kennywood was creative with the contest. We also didn't know what we were getting at Kennywood, but it was very straightforward to me. Like, here's the numbers, find the elements, match them up. It was interactive. But once again, it didn't take us on that ride. And that's why I think Max Force was by far the best of the teaser campaigns, because we started off not knowing what we were getting. Yeah. And it took us through it. And it laid it out, and it gave us clues that made sense that we could talk about. And it led us to something else, and it led us to something else. And you know what? It all made sense at the end. And I think that's what makes a good teaser campaign, is that it takes you on a ride, and it gives you enough information, but not enough to just outright give it to you either. And people still don't know what Cedar Point did this year. So.
Well, yeah, I'll tell you. Well,
and that was just out there. So that's why I say I think Max Force, in my mind, was the clear best teaser campaign of the year. The other two put on nice teaser campaigns as well. But I don't know what people are looking at when they see Copperhead Strike there.
Yeah, especially considering that you had the answer going into the teaser campaign. So to me, Carowinds did a nice job. Maybe if we didn't know what the answer was, maybe it would have been a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
But we had the, I guess, either the benefit or the disadvantage of knowing what the answer was, for the most part, really, very early on. So it really didn't have that anticipation aspect of what the ride was going to be. You know, anticipating the ride itself is a different thing, but anticipating getting the answer, you know, and guessing it right, you never had that excitement of, oh, are we going to be right? Sort of the same thing with Steel Vengeance and Twisted Timbers. The only things that we weren't sure about were the names, right? I mean, that's really what we were chasing. We knew what was happening to both rides. Construction was well underway before the announcements happened. So it was really just a matter of seeing what the rides themselves would actually be. Kennywood and Great America, we had no idea what either of them were going to be. I mean, Kennywood, you and I spent the most time on the Kennywood one for sure, putting together the word search and the numbers and matching them up. We submitted a guess. We were very close. We spent a lot of time discussing what it could be, and it ended up being something that I don't think anyone had guessed. At least nobody that I knew guessed what Kennywood's was ahead of time. It's a what? It's an S&S 9 looper? Like, nobody guessed S&S 9 looper. People were guessing invert. They were guessing Intamin launch. They were guessing Premiere launch. You know, they were guessing a lot of things, and I never heard one person say, you know, S&S 9 looper, which you know, is a distinction to make, because the contest wasn't to guess what the ride was. It was to guess what the records were, right?
Yeah.
So some people did that. We were very close. I think we had, was it 10 of them they had? And we
I think
guessed
we were like 1 or 2 off.
Yeah, I think we had 7 or 8, and we flip-flopped 2 of them.
Yeah.
I think like tallest inversion or whatever, I think we mix-matched that with one other one. We were going for like a giant Eurofighter or the invert. Thing is what we were going there for. The giant Eurofighter is kind of the closest thing to what it actually was, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, but some good campaigns done by the parks this year.
Fun times.
There was 1 vote for Six Flags Magic Mountain, and I was kind of wondering why.
Here's a few posters.
There's a few posters.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh boy, and the problem is they could have done a real nice job for something for what they did, but I guess they got
a coaster there next year, because it still hasn't started yet.
Well, right, yeah. So the next category here is your favorite themed area. So there's a lot to pick from here. The winner, maybe not a big surprise here, is Diagon Alley at Universal Studios Florida, 18% of the vote. But Andy, this was a real close one all the way through the voting. A lot of people voting for a lot of different things here. Ghost Town at Knott's Berry Farm came in second place, 13% of the vote. And then third place, the one that you voted for, Pandora, the World of Avatar at Disney's Animal Kingdom, with 11% of the vote. And I think that that's one that, give it another year or two for a few more people to go, that's one that might end up winning this category if we revisit this one in a couple years.
Well, and that's the problem is that this was really the year for Pandora to win, because I do believe that Star Wars, once that opens, is going to possibly blow a lot of this out of the water. You know, Diagon Alley, obviously super themed from the minute you walk into that area. Probably more themed than Hogsmeade is, just because, like, Hogsmeade, you still feel like you're in a theme park, whereas Diagon Alley, what they did that I think was that some people recognize, but some people may ignore, is they went up so high around you. So that you felt immersed in that area where you can't see any other part of the park, you can't see any other rides going on. It feels like you walked into Diagon Alley versus Hogsmeade, that you still feel like you're in a theme park, because there's roller coasters there. You know, you can see other stuff from different areas. So I think Diagon Alley is probably one of the best areas for that. Ghost Town is a little bit of a surprise to me. I think Ghost Town is amazing. I know it's the classic. It's really like one of the first themed areas at any park. But up until this year, where they introduced the Ghost Town Alive, it was kind of just an area in the park. It was kind of just you walk through. There's some shops there. Wasn't a huge focal point, but I think Knott's Berry did a really great job this past year. And last year, I believe it was, where they introduced the Ghost Town Alive, that really made that area come to life and really breathed some new stuff into it. During haunt season, it's amazing in there. The fog in there is outstanding, but obviously you can't see anything with there's so much fog.
And that makes me wonder how well Ghost Rider might actually do in the Thrilling 32, because for Ghost Town, with Ghost Town Alive, for Ghost Town to come in second place here, that makes me think that a lot of people have been out there recently, which makes me think that maybe Ghost Rider is going to rise in the polls this year. So we'll find that out in the coming weeks.
Hopefully, but I still think Pandora is clearly the best of the bunch here. The thing with Pandora is, I don't know, it's a lot smaller, and there's not a whole lot of other stuff to do. You have your two major rides there. They take up the bulk of the land, and then you have one restaurant, one shop that's tied to Flight of Passage. So maybe that's the detractor, is that it feels a lot smaller than maybe a Diagon Alley, where Diagon Alley has a whole lot more stuff to do. But then I think Pandora gives you that whole extra nighttime experience too. That it completely changes and things, start lighting up. So I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, and the other thing here is, we like to make the distinction. We don't like to use the word best here, because best implies that there is a right answer. Like 2 + 2 = 4, right? Mm-hmm. We like to use the word favorite because maybe we had a lot of Harry Potter fans vote in this, and maybe that's why. Maybe people didn't like the Pandora movie, and they might think that it's one of the best themed areas, but they're not a fan of the Pandora theming as much as they are the Harry Potter. Or maybe people like the Old West. I didn't vote for any of these. I think a lot of parks have the Old West theme. A lot of parks do like different countries and whatnot. One of the things that I really like that you don't see a lot in the States is sort of the desolate, apocalyptic death theme stuff, which they do a lot in Europe. And I like the area around Nemesis and Galactica, the Forbidden Valley, because it's about this, it's themed around this alien creature, which is Nemesis, that, rose into this desolate wasteland. And even like at Thorpe Park, they have Swarm Island, which is themed to the zombie apocalypse, and The Walking Dead. They have a Walking Dead haunt there. They have a couple of Walking Dead haunt mazes at Thorpe Park. Yeah. And they have the Saw area themed to the Saw movies. You don't see stuff like that over here, because blood and gore and whatnot just isn't something that our theme parks do. So again, maybe it's the fact that was different over there. But that's what I voted for there. But in terms of over here, I mean, the Western, I think, is real done at Ghost Town. I really like some of the areas in the Two Busch Gardens parks too. Williamsburg and Tampa, I think, have some really good, well-done areas. I think the addition of Cobra's Curse makes the Egypt area at Tampa really nice. The area around Montu is really, really well done. And some of the hamlets at Williamsburg, I think, are done pretty well as well. So, some other places that got some votes in there as well. Moving on to the favorite wood coaster collection. So your favorite favorite wood coaster collection at a park. I don't think a big surprise to you and me here that Holiday World came in at first place with 54% of the vote. Kings Island, second place with 20% of the vote. Racer, Beast, Woodstock Express, Mystic Timbers. And then Knoebels coming in third at 8% with Phoenix, Twister, and Flying Turns. Holiday World obviously having the triple threat of Voyage, Legend, and Raven. Not much to talk about here. This one is an easy one. I think the voters got this one. About as right as you could.
Well, yeah, and Holiday World, I think, has always been, in that number one position. But I feel like Kings Island has been making some moves lately to possibly, make that more of a discussion that we saw with the addition of Mystic Timbers.
And now the Racer Rehab.
The Racer retracking that's coming up for next year. Plus, there's always that talk of, possibly adding another wood coaster in there. And if you add another wood coaster into that collection, now you're talking a little bit of quantity, maybe over quality. And I know a lot of people still like the Beast and Mystic Timbers. And so you could really be talking about, that being even more of a discussion between Holiday World and Kings Island, because we don't foresee Holiday World to be putting in another wood coaster, anytime soon. So if Kings Island was to add another one, that maybe they will, maybe they won't, with this Giga coming, maybe that's just rumor or whatever. But I think it's an interesting discussion, especially as of late, between these two parks that are obviously the wood coaster kings here.
Well, and I think the other contender here, I don't know if it breaks the top three for me personally, but I think in terms of being well-rounded, I think you got to look at Six Flags Great America too, because you've got the RMC and Goliath, American Eagles, and is a pretty decent coaster with two tracks, the racing aspect. I think Viper is really good for a ride of its size and its age. I think they take pretty good care of that. And you've got the little one and Little Dipper too. I mean, you've got something for everyone there at Six Flags Great
And
America.
I tell you what, if they added a modern GCI into that collection, I think there's something there. There as well. I would think Great America, even as it stands, though, is probably better than Knoebels. Like, I know Phoenix is really good, and you really like Twister. Those are two solid rides, but Goliath's really good. Viper's a solid ride. American Eagle, depending on its day, is a solid ride. So I think Great America should be right in that discussion as well. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I think you could make a discussion for Great America there in the three spot for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on here, the defunct coaster that you most want to return. Now, this is an interesting one because we didn't put the qualifier on it that you had to have ridden it.
Yeah.
This is just one that's gone that you want to see come back. And I was surprised at the number of votes that Son of Beast got, right? Because everyone talks about Drachenfire, because I feel like most people my age probably didn't ride Drachenfire because they're too young to have ridden it. Some people who are a little bit older probably may have ridden Drachenfire at some point. So Drachenfire is always a ride that people want to come back. But Son of Beast is fairly new, fairly recently gone. And I think a lot of people, most people my age, have probably ridden it at least once with or without the loop, and nobody ever talks about how much they liked it. So I'm surprised that got as many votes as it did. But the winner...
It's the legend. It's the legend of things. Like, it's the legend of Drachenfire, that even though Drachenfire, so many people say it wasn't all that great, that it was actually kind of bad at points. It's the legend of things. It's the legend of Drachenfire, the legend of Son of Beast.
But it was a looping wooden coaster. I want to ride it.
Yeah, well.
So I don't know.
Go ride Outlaw Run.
Pretty much right now. So the winner of this, not much of a surprise maybe to you and me, with 24% of the vote, was Dueling Dragons at Islands of Adventure. And some people even kind of wrote in there that they wanted it in the original, with the original queue, the original theme, and the original racing aspect. We didn't make that distinction. Second place with 17% of the vote was Big Bad Wolf, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. And in third place with 15% of the vote was Eagle Fortress at Everland in South Korea. And you and I looked at this ride together because this is a ride that you didn't really know about until it started getting a lot of votes here. I've known about this ride for a couple years. Basically, if you don't know Eagle Fortress, go look it up on YouTube or RCDB. Imagine taking Boulder Dash, which is a ride you should all know, but make Boulder Dash an aero suspended swinging coaster like Big Bad Wolf. That's what this ride was.
Yeah, no, seriously.
It's and it's got some crazy, ridiculous swinging. It was standing but not operating for a very, very long time, and was finally ripped out a couple years ago. I can imagine the maintenance costs were astronomical on this ride, the way it swung back and forth and the speed it had. This was at the same park where T Express currently is, Everland there. So I don't know a whole lot of people who've ridden this, but I do know a few people who rode this and said that it was really, really a cool experience.
And I find it funny that you have two aero suspended coasters on here. You have
how about that?
And Eagle Fortress. Granted, there's an element of, well, how many rides have actually been removed, and how many rides do people actually remember? People always talk about the Bobs at Riverview Park. People talk about Cyclone at Cedar Point, or maybe the Crystal, was it the Crystal Beach?
Crystal Beach Cyclone got some votes. Yep, absolutely.
Like these are rides that people always talk about, but they're really old rides too. And they're like, well, I think people were really feeling with this one is either they've ridden something. Like me, I voted for Big Bad Wolf because I had ridden it before when I was younger. I would love to ride it again to kind of compare those rides, or Dueling Dragons, something like that, where a lot of people missed out on it and they feel like they could have been on it, and they're like, I should have booked that trip earlier. Or something like Eagle Fortress, where it was open when we were all alive, but who's actually going to have the time to get out to the east to go ride it, besides the super hardcore people. So it's interesting where people went with this. The ride that closed the least amount of time ago, Dueling Dragons, is the one that wins here. So I find that to be somewhat
yeah, and that's interesting because you and I hear enough people that say, I don't need Dueling Dragons to come back. So it's real interesting that this ended up winning. I think the fourth place voter is actually Hypersonic at King's Dominion, which is one that's not too long gone.
Well, you'll get Max Force now, hopefully. So
yeah, right. That's exactly right. So we'll see how that goes. Halfway home here, the next award here is the favorite roller coaster state. Now, Andy, you and I did a show on this a couple years ago. Yes. So, if you're interested in hearing a super long discussion about which state is the best roller coaster state, go back to that was a very early episode. That was a very early episode. That was like I think like in the first couple months of when we started it.
Well, you know what? I'm curious now. So as you talk, I'm going to look this up. So
yeah, so Andy's going to look up the episode, so you can look up the episode number. I feel like it was like 11 or 12. It was pretty early. But the favorite roller coaster state with 57% of the vote is Ohio. I don't think that's a big surprise between Cedar Point, Kings Island, and a couple of the other options you got there. Pennsylvania coming in second with 23%. You got Hershey, Dorney, Knoebels, Lakemont, Waldameer. You got a bunch of smaller parks there. Now you got Sesame Place. And in third place, a little bit of surprise for me, 9% of the vote, California.
Well, the only other state that's really ever talked about is kind of Florida in that discussion. And Florida's, been adding a lot of big stuff lately. Busch Gardens Tampa's been adding some stuff. We got Mako at SeaWorld. So and
with White Lightning and Mind Blower, you've kind of really you've put a couple good wood coasters in there.
I tell you what, Florida's better than Pennsylvania in my book. Pennsylvania is a waste of time for the most part.
Oh, stop it! Come on.
No, I'm dead serious. You ride Phoenix, you ride Sky Rush, go home after that. The worst state in the union. Give it up. Oh, I hate Pennsylvania. Oh just God. A waste of time from top to bottom.
Oh boy, we need to get you back to Pennsylvania.
Clearly, the best state is Ohio.
Did you find that? Did you find that episode number?
Yes, it's episode number 21 actually, but it was done way back in the beginning of 2015. So it was right there at the very beginning.
That was in our first year of doing Uncut. Hard to believe that was almost 5 years ago.
Discussion on this, you can go back to that episode. And granted, Florida's changed a little bit since then.
Florida has changed a little bit. They've gotten, White Lightning had just opened at that time.
Trust me, I agree that Pennsylvania is still the worst state in the union back then.
Well, I think you said that back then.
That hasn't changed.
I remember that pretty vividly. So there we go. Next up, we went with, this is a new one that we had, favorite merchandise and souvenirs. This is one we actually got an idea from years ago. The Golden Tickets actually did this for like a year or two. They did this award. So we decided to give it a shot here. And coming in first place was Cedar Point with 45% of the vote. Number 2 was the Magic Kingdom with 10%. And third was Islands of Adventure with 8% of the vote. And Cedar Point, in terms of roller coaster stuff, they have T-shirts for almost every ride. They have T-shirts for defunct rides now. Wildcat, Disaster Transport, Whitewater Landing. They even got stuff for Mine Ride now. They're selling all sorts of different stuff. You have the Coaster Dynamics, the Nano Coasters. They have the Statics trains. They've got all those hats, the New Era hats now. They've got everything at Cedar Point that you could possibly want.
I know people will just say, hey, it's, Cedar Point fanboys, voting for this. But no, it's not that at all. It's like you said, they have stuff for every single one of their rides. They brand their park well, that
Yep.
you can find more stuff that says Cedar Point there than I think you can find stuff that says like park names of like Disney. And that's my knock on Disney and Islands of Adventure and Universal to some extent, is they have a lot of stuff, but it's not branded specifically towards their stuff. So like
Right.
if you want to find like a Space Mountain t-shirt, you only have one option. Like there might be a second option.
You have a dark blue I have it. You have a dark blue option, a dark blue with the picture of the mountain that says Space Mountain underneath it.
If you want to find a ride specific, piece of merchandise, it's not easy to do at Disney or Islands of Adventure. What was I looking for? I was looking for a Matterhorn bobsled piece of merchandise. And literally the only thing I could find in the entire Disneyland property was a single pin that had Matterhorn bobsleds on it. So to me,
they're not t-shirt people.
They're selling their brand. It's like Six Flags. They're selling their brand. If you go to any Six Flags park, once again, you have a hard time trying to find, a Goliath at Six Flags Over Georgia t-shirt. There's probably only one or two. I'll tell you what Six Flags Park has done a great job with their merchandise lately. It's Great America once again. Great America has t-shirts for almost a lot of their rides. Now, granted, there's different times of the season, when things come and go, in different years where things come and go. But over the last few years, Great America has been producing. I got you that wonderful Viper t-shirt this year.
Well, and the year before that, I had Adam pick me up a green Viper shirt that they had there. I've since the last time I went to Great America, I've gotten 2 Viper shirts from there. One that Adam got, and then one that you got me.
Yeah, they've done a great job. Whereas, Islands of Adventure and Disney, they have a lot of merchandise, but it's generic brand merchandise a lot of times.
It's Disney stuff. It's not Disney World or Disneyland necessarily.
Go find me a Hulk t-shirt with the roller coaster on it. There's one there. I have it. There's only one, though. Trying to find, a Harry Potter Forbidden Journey pin.
You won't find it.
It's not there anywhere.
You can get a robe.
You can get a robe. You can get a wand. You can get everything. You can get stuffed animals up the wazoo. But that's all from Harry Potter. That's not from the park. So I kind of almost take a little bit of exception to these things because, yes, they have a lot of merchandise, but the merchandise isn't specific to the parks.
You can just go online to Amazon and get the same thing.
Seriously, a lot of times you can. Now, they have exclusive stuff at the parks.
Sure.
But Cedar Point, I can walk into Cedar Point and I can pick up off, if I wanted to, I could walk into Cedar Point today and find 7 Millennium Force t-shirts. Easy. At least 7, if not more than 7. And
I have 3 Steel Vengeance shirts. I have a Steel Vengeance polo. I have a Steel Vengeance.
They have a whole shop just of Steel Vengeance crap. You can find more Steel Vengeance stuff than you can shake a stick at.
I have 3 Steel Vengeance t-shirts. I have a Steel Vengeance polo. I have 2 Steel Vengeance coffee mugs, and I have a Steel Vengeance. I have the polo shirt. What else do I have? I have all sorts of Steel Vengeance stuff.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing, though.
The block of wood.
Other parks like Kings Island or maybe other Cedar Fair parks or Six Flags parks, yes, you can usually find that year 1. But how about it in year 5? How about in year 10? Right. Millennium Force is almost 20 years old. And like I said, I can walk in there and find 7 different t-shirts for Millennium Force. I can find 3 different t-shirts for Magnum. I can find, a couple of t-shirts for Raptor every year. That they have stuff available to them for all of their rides for the most part. And that's why I think they're number 1, is that they brand their park, they brand their rides, and they know how to make money off of it.
What other park has a shirt for Cedar Creek Mine Ride?
Yeah. What other Arrow Mine Ride shirts have you seen in your life?
Seriously. 50 years old.
So, okay.
All right. So next up, we got the new park that you want to visit most. So basically, this was the park that you have not been to that you want to visit. And coming in first place with 23% was Europa Park. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, a lot of people haven't been over to Europe that have voted in these awards, and people hear that that's the best park over there, so naturally that's the one they want to go to. Second place with 9% of the vote was Phantasialand, another park that looks fantastic, especially the new Klugheim area with Terran. and Reich. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. Apologize if I mispronounced that. That area looks outstanding. The area around Black Mamba, the Deep in Africa, I think is the name of the themed area around there. They've got some excellent themed rides. The Mine Train is excellently themed there. The theming looks amazing at both of those parks. So I'm not surprised that both of those were to be on here. And coming in third with 8% of the vote was Dollywood. And I think that that's maybe a lot of our West Coast people who haven't been out towards this way. Because generally speaking, Dollywood is one of the parks that you hear the most about in the States, and especially with Lightning Rod and RMC being a big thing, I feel like that's a big draw to Dollywood right now.
And, Dollywood's a little bit out of the way that, it's not like, it's not on the East Coast really. It's a big trip there. If you're in the Midwest, it's still, like, even from Chicago, it's a big trip. So it's a big trip because it's kind of that centrally located park that everyone can kind of get to, but it's right outside of the range of maybe what it is to, like, just go jump in a car and drive there. So like you said, that's probably not surprising. And it's just been recently that they've started really adding big coasters, like with, you think of like Wild Eagle, back in 2012. And then you had, Fire Chaser added, and then obviously Lightning Rod, changed the game a little bit down there. So it's not
They're building a new area this year too.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me that Dollywood would be on that list there out of all the American parks, I think.
Yeah, well, and it's 4 hours from Carowinds and 4 hours from over Georgia, so it's really tough to make just a weekend trip where you can hit two parks. It's kind of just, really the only other thing close is Lake Winnie down there in Chattanooga, and not a lot of people point that one out unless they've been pretty much to those other parks. So next up, we had the most underrated park, and we've done most underrated coaster before. We did most underrated park, and much like the underrated coaster category, you get votes that are all over the map, right? You get a lot of votes for different things, and then you get 1, 2, or 3 votes for a lot of things, and the list becomes very long. So the top vote getters in first place was Holiday World. Second place was Knott's Berry Farm, and in third place was Lagoon out there in Utah. And I really enjoyed Lagoon. I think all three of I think Holiday World is very highly rated already. If you want to call it underrated, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think Knott's Berry Farm, we've talked about on this show many, many times how you could argue in terms of being the best park in the Cedar Fair chain in terms of being a well-rounded family experience. Maybe not in terms of thrill rides and roller coasters, absolutely not. There's probably 3 or 4 parks in the Cedar Fair chain that probably have better roller coasters as a whole. I mean, Cedar Point, obviously, I think you could make the argument that Carowinds, King's Dominion, Kings Island, Canada's Wonderland, you could make the argument for some of those. But in terms of a well-rounded, nicely themed family experience, I think Knott's is probably the most well-rounded park in the Cedar Fair chain. The theming, the rides, the atmosphere, the food. I think that, they've got a lot of good examples. They've got good entertainment there as well. Lagoon, I think, is a good one as well. I really liked our visit to Lagoon. What were your thoughts on Lagoon? You went, a year after I did.
I didn't really think much of Lagoon. In terms of the layout of the park is strange.
The layout is weird. I'll give you that.
Everything feels very cramped in the park because it's almost like a park that is like a straight line across as opposed to going deep.
It's very shallow, and you go in and half the park's on your right, half the park's on your left, and then they have the Pioneer Village in the back, and then the water park's kind of nestled in there. And
to me, like, I thought the rides were nice. I didn't think the rides were overwhelmingly nice. I didn't get any sense of people going out of their way for things. I didn't like for workers that is. I didn't get a sense of, hey, they have a lot of good shows here. They have a lot of old stuff mixed in with a couple of new things. I don't know if underrated is the word I would use for Lagoon. I would say almost if you want like a classic experience that has a more modern feel to it, maybe, but Underrated. I don't know. Lagoon to me, that's not a place I'm looking forward to go back to at all. Like
Lagoon to me, what surprised me most about Lagoon was I liked that they had beaver tails, number one. Number two, they had two really good dark rides that I enjoyed, and they just refurbished Terror Ride for the big anniversary a year or two ago. I thought the coaster collection was nice. I don't think it was out of this world amazing, but I think Cannibal is a really nice coaster. Colossus and Wicked, I think, are a good supporting class. I think the wood coasters are fine. The dark rides, they have a couple of nice flat rides. They have the top scan there. And I thought the park was very clean. I thought it was well landscaped. They had a lot of colors, a lot of flowers. I thought it was well taken care of. They had a little bit of uniqueness with the animals and the Pioneer Village. So I thought it was unique. I thought it was different. Underrated. Sure, maybe. I guess again, this might be the West Coast coming through there a little bit, the same way that it had, maybe the same way that it has knots in there. And also maybe the same way that Dollywood was in the one you most want to visit. Because a lot of those West Coast people haven't been out here. Maybe they're voting in this one too.
Yeah. I don't know. So whatever.
All right. So let's get to the final two categories here tonight, which are the two big ones. Your favorite park, 2018. This is one of the ones that we do every year. And not much of a surprise with our audience here. The Ride Warrior Choice Awards, 54% voting for Cedar Point, obviously the roller coaster capital of the world. And in terms of, and again, we don't like to use the word best, but favorite, if you have to pick what park do you want to go to for the weekend, a lot of people, especially roller coaster heavy people, that's our audience. We do Disney shows here and they don't do very well. We talk about Cedar Point and people are watching them over and over and over again, right? So obviously people are going to pick Cedar Point. Our audience is going to pick Cedar Point. So 54% of the vote. And interesting here, number two was Dollywood.
Yeah.
So even the people who've been to Dollywood really like it and put it as one of their favorite parks. And third was Europa Park at 6% of the vote. So, our European voters who have voted, it seems a lot of people liking Europa Park. We had some people who are from the States who voted for Europa Park or even Phantasialand. We had some people who are from Europe who voted for Cedar Point. Obviously, it's a little bit of a numbers game there, but favorite park in terms of if you said, hey, you have one weekend to go to any park you want, Cedar Point's at the top of everybody's list or close to the top of everyone's list.
I will never understand the people that don't like Cedar Point, that hate on Cedar Point. I don't know why they're doing what they do. I don't know if it's a Patriots thing where people don't like the Patriots because they win. I've never understood that. I've never understood that when you have something that's really good, that they prove themselves that they're really good, and then you just dislike them because of that. That's petty to me. Cedar Point has noticeable flaws in it. It's not a perfect park. But if we're all going to ride rides, which is the ultimate goal of what we do, not to look at trees. If I want to look at trees, I'll go to an arboretum. That's what I'll do. So it's just like if I want to eat steak, I go to a steakhouse. Cedar Point is the roller coaster capital of the world. When I want to ride roller coasters, that's where I go. There's no other.
If you want a sandwich, Rob Dole, you go to Subway. I don't get a salad. It's not called Saladway. I get a submarine at Subway.
Yeah, it's just the people. It's like people who order fish at a steakhouse. Why? Why it's a steakhouse? Go to a fish store. What the hell?
It's like a Joe's Crab Shack. Oh, give me a cheeseburger.
Yeah, give me a cheeseburger.
I did that once as a kid.
Oh, get the hell out of here.
Oh, boy. So, all right, final category of the evening. And, of course, this is the most anticipated ride coming for 2019, right? And last year, this was an easy one. This was one of the least exciting ones. This year, I think because there isn't that top-of-the-line coaster that everyone's talking about, and there's a couple rides that some people are talking about, this one's real interesting. So I guess we call it second place. Technically, it's third place. Max Force at Six Flags Great America with 14% of the vote, because we had a tie for first. A tie. All the hundreds of voters, we had a dead tie for first place. And I think that indicates to you that there's a couple rides that everyone's exciting for, but there's not one ride that everyone is hopping on an airplane, hopping in a car to go ride this year, like Steel Vengeance. Steel Curtain and Copperhead Strike both getting exactly 24% of the vote with rounding, but they had the same exact number of votes. All the voters, they couldn't decide.
Well, and you know, the issue here is we're talking about parks that are very different areas of the country. So, you know, the Carowinds people, you know, a lot of people are going to have to travel down south to get that. The people who already live there probably aren't going to be traveling up to Kennywood. Max Force out in the Midwest. So we've kind of spread out, you know, who you know, in particular, what things they might be interested in. And then I also think that all three of these rides have some pretty big question marks next to them. We just got the POV released of Max Force, and I think everyone's commenting that, you know,
25 seconds. I timed it from the time the launch starts to the time it starts to hit the brakes.
It's 5 elements long. It better be a good 5 elements, because it's going to be a real short ride. So there's a question mark there. Steel Curtain. We don't know how SNSs are going to ride. So both for Max Force and Steel Curtain, how is an SNS going to perform in the year 2019? I don't know. We haven't had an SNS roller coaster in forever. If you know, besides like the free fly stuff. And then Copperhead Strike looks like it was the biggest investment, but I think there's a whole lot of question marks next to that one too, with you know, how fast it's going to go, how are these launches going to be, is it going to give you hang time like Monster, is it going to, you know, go really fast through these inversions, is there going to be a backwards section? You know, people are talking now about them possibly putting a backwards car on some of the trains. Who knows what's going to happen? So all three of these rides, I think, have big question marks next to them, which is why we get a result like this where people are split down the middle.
Yeah, and again, I don't think any of these three rides on here are going to be bad rides. I think they're all going to be good rides. But we don't have the ride. We don't have the ride coming in 2019 that everyone looks at and says that could be a new top 10, top 5 roller coaster. You know, everybody, right, looked at Steel Vengeance, and most people said that's going to be one of the best steel coasters in the world, if not the best steel coaster in the world. That was the expectation for it. Nobody's looking at Copperhead Strike. Nobody's looking at Steel Curtain. Nobody's looking at Max Force and saying, you know, that's going to be one of the best steel coasters in the world. Everyone's looking at these rides and they're saying, oh, that's going to be a nice ride.
And very well, any of these three rides could be a top 20 ride, could be a top 15 ride, could be a top 10 ride. We haven't really had a big Mac coaster in America yet. You know, is Copperhead Strike going to be more like Blue Fire? We don't know. Like I said, there's question marks next to this, and until we get real point of views of them actually testing the ride and real, you know, video of that, I think those questions are going to remain there. And once we do get that, I think we're going to have to wait till people actually get on it, and maybe even until you get on it or I get on it, so that I can actually see for myself, because sometimes I can't trust other people's opinions. And I think all three of these rides, it's going to come down to probably me having to go ride it to ultimately determine what kind of ride it is.
No, I absolutely agree with you. So final question for the night, just to, you know, to throw this out there. Copperhead Strike, Steel Curtain, Max Force. How many of these three rides are in the Thrilling 32 brackets next year?
Well, that's a good question.
I would say if I just had to give you a number and didn't have to name the ride, I would say 1.
I'm gonna go on a limb and say we're going to be talking about these three rides the same way that we talked about things like Twisted Cyclone this year, like Oscar. Well, we discounted Oscar's Wacky Taxi.
Yeah, and look, that got in.
Like Twisted Cyclone, Time Traveler, where I get the same feeling about these. I actually feel a little bit stronger about a ride like Time Traveler than these three rides.
I agree.
I don't know if any of these three rides are even in the 32. It's going to be, or it could very well be that they blow us away and then they're easily in. I think it's going to come down to, once again, having to ride it. And
I
you, Danny Miller, I'm pretty good at being able to say, looking at a POV and saying, that one's going to be pretty good. Yeah. These are three that I am not capable of doing that. I'm going to have to write it once, maybe only once, but once is all I need.
Well, and I think Steel Curtain has the highest ceiling of any of these three. I think Steel Curtain has the highest potential, but I think it's really going to come down to the...
Well, it's how much do you like going upside down, too? Like, that's the problem with
Well, I don't mind going upside down, but again, the thing with going upside down is going upside down, I mean, you have to do one of two things. If you just go upside down for the sake of going upside down, that's one thing. But if you go upside down, you need to do one of a couple things. You need to go upside down slowly and hang me out of my seat, like some of the RMC elements do, like Monster at Adventureland does. We talk about that all the time. You need to go through a corkscrew or a loop and pin me to my seat, like a lot of your B&M inverts do. Rides like Banshee, Afterburn, Raptor even. Raptor pins you to your seat real nicely in the Cobra roll and in the loops and even in the corkscrews and helix. You have to do things like that. Or you have to do what Steel Vengeance does in the barrel rolls and Twisted Timbers in the barrel roll, and you have to throw me out of my seat, where I'm twisting at a high enough rate of speed that I feel like I'm being thrown out of my seat. Wicked Cyclone, you sort of hang out of your seat. Goliath at Great America, you hang out of your seat, right? Steel Vengeance has those barrel rolls that are fast enough where you actually get thrown out of your seat. And I think, you have to do one of those three things to really make the inversions worthwhile. The arrow loopers, the corkscrews, you're not really hanging, you're not being pressed out into your seat, and those are built in a different time, but you're going upside down for the sake of going upside down on a lot of those rides.
Yeah.
Now the Schwarzkopfs, you get pinned to your seat pretty nicely in some of those loops, but Steel Curtain and Copperhead Strike, those inversions got to do something. There's got to be more to those inversions than just going upside down for going upside down's sake. I mean, in 2019, going upside down isn't a new thing. Going upside down by itself is not an exciting thing anymore. You've got to give it a
different stuff with it, right?
Exactly. So, and all three of these rides do have inversions, and they all have different style inversions. I mean, Steel Curtain's got some really neat looking ones. Copperhead Strike sort of has like the top hat stall. It's got two loops that might look very slow, and you might get some good hang time out of it. You got the JoJo roll at the beginning. Max Force has that high speed barrel roll. Maybe we'll get something out of those. And then, the little fake out dive loop thingies. So, I mean, there's potential to have some uniqueness in all three of these rides.
Well, this is the category to watch for 2020 too, because
that's another good point.
The world in 2020, I say. So we'll see.
Well, and we'll have to see next year when we get to the favorite new ride of 2019. We'll have to see how this list here. Clearly, Copperhead Strike and Steel Curtain and Max Force. Really not a whole lot of decisiveness between those three rides. It'll be interesting a year from now to see how these rank in the first category next year and see where people came down on.
Yeah. So I think that wraps us up here for the Ride Warrior Choice Awards. Once again, we'd like to thank all of you for participating in this. That it's up to you to determine these winners. It's not on us. It's not on my buddies. It's on us collectively. To determine who wins these awards. And I think we had a wonderful group of winners this year.
And one more thing before I forget, we do want to thank Coaster Studios and Coaster Radio. Both of them helped plug this in their videos and on the podcast over at Coaster Radio and on Facebook. Both of those folks, Taylor at Coaster Studios and Mike and EB over at Coaster Radio, were kind enough to plug the Ride Warrior Choice Awards this year, and we got a lot of voters coming in from those two sources. So we want to say thank you to those two groups as well for helping us out again this year.
Absolutely. So, and like we said at the beginning of the show, submit your brackets. That the Thrilling 32 reveal shows are going to be here before you know it. We're going to find out those top 50 wood, those top 50 steel coasters, and ultimately who takes home the crown in the wrestling title, the belt. The belt. That's currently stacked away somewhere. So, so anyway, thank you for joining us here. I'm, of course, Andrew Barchak from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Ride Warriors.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.